We got lots of people joining. Welcome, everyone. Just going to wait a little while for people to join, and we'll get started about 7 or about 7:05. Welcome to everyone who's just joining us. We're just waiting a little bit for everyone to get settled in, and we'll get started just after 7. Hi everyone, welcome to the session. We are still just waiting on a few more people to join, so we're just going to give it a couple more minutes while everyone gets settled in, and we'll get started shortly. Welcome to all the new people that have just joined us. There's lots of you coming in now. We're just going to get started in a couple of minutes. All right, we might kick off. I might begin today by acknowledging that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Darug clan. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you are all on today and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the 2024 Teen Disengagement Forum. I hope you are all doing well tonight. My name is Jess. I am the Community Development Officer for City of Ryde, and I take care of the children and families and youth portfolio. So I wear a few hats. Tonight we've got some awesome panelists with us, which I'll introduce you to in a minute. So tonight's session will be some pre-made questions that we've developed together, and we'll be asking the panelists to answer those. And then after we've finished the structured part of the session, we'll open to a Q&A where you can ask anything that might have arisen out of that main part. So I will just also acknowledge that we are recording today's session. I did just put a note in the chat that if you wish to remain anonymous, please just de-identify your name. So if you do ask a question, you won't be identifiable. And with that, I'm going to hand over to our lovely panelists who have joined us tonight. Just see if here we go. So first up, we have Ryan from Headspace. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
I certainly can. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ryan, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at Headspace Chatswood. So we cover pretty much the whole lower and upper North Shore and extend out to Ryde as well.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Next up, we have Epic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline from Epic. Epic is empowering parents in crisis. We provide peer support to parents and carers of young people aged 12 to 25.
Awesome, thanks, Maddie. We also have Sibba here, but she's a little bit sick, so she'll chime in here and there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sibba from Epic. Thank you.
And thank you, Sibba, for being with us tonight, even though you're not well. Next, we have SDEC, Rachel.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel. So I have the community engagement role for SDEC. So that's Sydney Drug Education and Counselling Centre. So we offer drug and alcohol counselling for young people and support for their families. So my role is collaborating with communities and services and trying to make it as easy as possible for young people and families to access our service. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. And we also have the lovely Dr. Alana Sinclair. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm a GP in the North Turramurra Upper North Shore area. I've been working about 23 years in the district, and within a practice, apart from general practice, I've enjoyed a lot of mental health and have an interest particularly in adolescence over that time. Prior to that, I did 10 years in emergency throughout different places in Sydney and the country actually, prior to my general practice.
Awesome, thanks, Alana. And we did also have Kids Youth Development Service joining us tonight. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it, but I will pass on their details in a follow-up email later tonight. All right, so with that, we're going to jump straight into the questions. So our first question, to our panelists. Why do you think parents and caregivers often struggle to connect with their young person when they're experiencing difficulties? Maddie, would you like to start us off with that one? Oh, you're on mute, Maddie.
You think I would have learnt that by now?
Happens to the best of us.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I think when challenges arise, it does affect the whole family. But why do parents find it tricky to connect when the challenges arise? I think that it can be a mix of emotion and fear and also lack of understanding, and along with the way that we as parents were brought up as well. So whether, often to be seen and not heard. So with the emotional side, and the emotional attachment that we have with our young people, sometimes it makes it difficult to have the hard conversations from a rational viewpoint, a conversation that we may easily be able to have with someone who we're not so connected with. And the fear also, this is something that I have experienced myself, is, what if my child doesn't finish school? What if this? And so the end story, the fear of the end is getting in the way of what's presenting at the time. And then also the lack of full understanding and training in, how to recognize if a young person their mental health is declining, or how to recognize or what to do with too much digital use, that sort of thing. So I think that it's a lack of understanding of a situation. And also unsure on how to broach a situation as well. So that would be communication skills. And also parents are very time poor. We have so many balls up in the air. If one ball falls, it's really, really tricky to keep the rest in place. So I think that has a lot to do with how we can connect as well.
Oh, you're on mute now, Jess.
Sorry. Brian, can we hear from you what you've seen in clinic from the young person's perspective?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Maddie's actually reflected a lot of what we tend to hear from young people as being, some of those challenges and struggles that they find with connecting with parents. We see a whole range of, presentations come through, but I think a couple of points that come up quite often are around sort of that generational changes and influences. And we see that not just young people, but parents as well, they may find it difficult to understand what the other party is going through. And that is definitely normal and definitely something we see a lot. And a lot of that does come down to communication at times. We find that communication between parents and young people is super important. And when there may not be quite clear communication, we do see some of those struggles. And the other thing that we see come through quite a lot is that parents tend to have that natural tendency sometimes to want to try and fix everything. And we definitely admire that about parents. But whilst this is well-intentioned, young people can see it as being nagging at times, or, not listening to what the young person is really trying to say. And so they may tend to switch off at times. Again, whilst this is definitely well-intentioned, we do see these things come through quite often.
Thanks, Ryan. And Rachel, what about from a drug and alcohol perspective?
Yeah, from a drug and alcohol perspective, we know that there's quite a bit of stigma attached to drug use. So this can create lots of feelings of shame for parents when their young person uses substances. So we all have our own different beliefs and ideas about drug use. So when parents and their young person, they might have conflicting beliefs around drug and alcohol, this can also create a lot of difficulties in connecting. Connecting can also be a bit of a challenge if you're not sure about your own beliefs in this area. So it's really important to look inwards and examine, what are my beliefs around substances? So for example, you might have the belief that recreational drug use is okay, or you might have the belief that there should be no drug use at all. So these beliefs and this difference between your perspective and your young person, that can create conflict and contribute to a bit of difficulty in connecting. So a really great starting point from a drug and alcohol perspective is to just do a little bit of that reflective work and think, what are my beliefs and what do I think around substances?
Thanks, Rachel. Alana, could you talk us through a little bit about what might be going on for the teenage brain around this time?
Thanks, Jess. Thanks for all the other comments. Yeah, look, what I wanted to, I suppose, highlight for the viewers is the difference of the teen brain throughout adolescence. It's been a long time certainly since I've been there, and you do forget what it's like to experience it through the eyes of a teenager. The whole adolescent period is a time where the child transitions to adulthood. And for some, that can be a short period of time and without too much stress. And for others, it can be really quite a prolonged and difficult period, throwing in hormones, and they're trying to develop their own sense of identity. And that's what happens through adolescence. I'm sure everybody's aware that adolescence now is extending to the pre-teens. So it's starting earlier. We see it quite significantly going into sort of primary school, and then also going into sort of the mid-20s, whereas once upon a time people were sort of adults by sort of 17, 18. So that's a lot of stresses for the parents for a very prolonged period. The other thing, what you were saying about, Jess, I wanted to highlight is the difference between the teen brain. Adolescent brain has really highs and really lows, much higher than the adult. So they go really high when they're having a great time, they have great fun with friends, but equally when they go low, they go very low. And it's like a roller coaster ride for the young ones, whereas an adult brain is a lot more stable. So I think that actually the differences, and I think that can add stress to parents because they don't understand. And the teen brain is quite reactive, so they get these dopamine surges and they can react. And it's important for also the parent not to go along that roller coaster ride with them, so support them, but not to themselves go all the ups and downs. I think that's important for the parents to understand the differences of that maturing teen brain. And often it's up to 25 before some people actually get the adult maturity.
Thanks, Alana. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. What role do parents and caregivers have in supporting young people? Ryan, would you like to kick us off for this one?
Certainly. I think the first thing to really acknowledge from a clinical perspective is that this idea of family inclusive practice has really been proven to lead to better outcomes and be really beneficial for young people who may be going through mental health challenges in their own life. And I think that's also reflective of our own experiences. We know that when we do have that sense of family and when we do have those support services in place in our own homes, we definitely feel a lot better off. So I think that's one of the first things we really want to acknowledge is that having that family presence and having that sense of not stability, but just having that family presence in the home is super important. The other thing really that I want to say is that as a parent, you don't always have to have all the answers for your young person, but you will be the first person to notice changes in your young person. You see them, if not every day, nearly every day. So you will be that first person to notice that change. You've seen them grown up, so you know them better than anyone else. So what we can do to really help foster that environment is by creating a supportive, non-judgmental environment in the house where the young person can feel comfortable to talk about what they may be experiencing rather than hide it. And I think really emphasizing that non-judgmental part, as hard as it can be at times, we really want to encourage our young people to speak openly where they can, without fear of being judged of what's going on. So I think that's parents do play that really, really crucial role in supporting our young people.
They sure do. Alana, do you have any thoughts on the back of that?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Look, when I was thinking about this, I suppose in one sense, I come up with two simple words that might help explain what I sort of suggest to people as well, how they can support. So the first one, I think, and the other panelists probably agree with that often as a role as a parent, we do the protection. which comes in instinctively, especially for young ones. And so we do provide that safe and supportive environment that we do. Our first instinct is protect. But what is the challenge for a lot of us is to, as the teenage and adolescent is growing and developing their own sense, is to actually flip from protect, not all the time, but to go prepare. So we actually have to sometimes help prepare and not always jump in and do the protection, and help guide them to find the right way and give them a bit of a sense of responsibility and work with them together. And I suppose that's why I like those words, because sometimes you have to think to yourself, am I just jumping in to protect, and am I better to do some preparation and guiding in this situation? And with that, I wanted to highlight what I also have found a lot of the sort of core anchors for teens to help foster and guide them so that they have these other sort of anchors in life to help them negotiate. And that would be your own relationship with your teenager, to foster some good peer and friendships that you can go through your own network of friends, to support them in extended family. And if you don't have extended family, maybe extended friends and community, and to give them an opportunity to have an interest that they like, that's something they're good at, and support them in that, because if they're feeling good about something that they enjoy, that will often flow to their other areas. And that's important to understand, that they need something that they're good at. And then also sometimes, if it's relevant at the right age, is to encourage some part-time work. Often that will, by supporting that helps them get ahead as well. And then, of course, their engagement with school and working with the school to help that. So I suppose I wanted to highlight some of the anchors that you can help provide, but also to think about in certain situations, rather than jumping in, where you can guide and talk to the team to help them find their own way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alana. Rachel.
Yeah, so we definitely agree with both panelists that parents do have such an important role, and it's really a balancing act between those roles. So they're the ones who are at home with the young person. So we see it as two roles. One role is to support the young person. So to be there if something goes wrong, to be that loving and supportive home base. Then the second role is to set clear expectations and boundaries. So having challenge of balancing these roles can be really difficult, because both roles are equally as important. So by setting clear expectations and boundaries, this helps then for young people to build the skills ready to be an adult. And sometimes the reality is that young people don't want to connect. So then it's about, how can you still be that base of support and set clear expectations and boundaries? So this includes, from the drug and alcohol perspective, having expectations around substance use. And so this is a really good opportunity, again, to look inward and reflect, what are my expectations around drug and alcohol in my household? So we often find that when parents come to our service, this might be the first time that they're actually considering this. And sometimes they might be learning that they might have a problem. So an example of reflecting on your own expectations is, maybe you are okay with recreational use. Then the question might be, to what extent? Is it okay to use to the point that they can't walk, that they become unwell? What are those limits and boundaries? So really having a look at those boundaries in your home and how you can be that support, and also clear limits.
Absolutely, very important. And Maddie, what about from a parent's perspective?
Well, from a parent's, first of all, I really liked what you were saying there, Rachel, because I think if you look at it from a work perspective, the expectation might be policies and procedures which have to be communicated very well. So it's just, that was my brain going, yeah, I think that all stems back to the communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
From an early time. Yeah. And also I've written down protect and prepare, because it has something to do with what I was thinking, what role does a parent have? And from the parent's perspective, in EPIC, we look at parents as being first responders. We are there, as Ryan said, we're there you know, the 24/7. We know our young people better than anybody else. So that's the role that we take on, but we're not necessarily trained in the plethora of things that are happening in these days. We're kind of the crash test dummies for the digital era, and where there's a lot of, maybe through COVID, maybe the hangover from COVID is quite a bit of disengagement. So I think not doing it alone is where I would reach out and look for your support. So first responders, primary caregivers, you know, food, shelter, education, health, mental health, and then all the other things that go with it. So it's a very big job. And I think that's why it's really lovely that we're having this conversation together, and we can sort of create a village, I think, amongst the collaborative organisations, amongst parents, amongst schools. The more we do that, I think the better our community is.
Absolutely. Well said, Maddie.
Hmm.
Okay, on to our next question.
Jess, before you move on, sorry, I'm just going to say one sentence. I won't say much because I can't talk clearly. Hopefully it's coming across all right. A couple of words that Dr. Sinclair have used and Maddie just said about protection. And yes, absolutely, a parent's job is to protect. But I was reading an article just a couple of days ago about the difference between risk and harm. So we 100% should not allow harm to come our kids' way, but risk, a little bit of risk, and teaching our kids how to take good risks, you know, or calculated risks is part of life. And to teach them this is very, very important. And I think it is something that both Dr. Ilana and Maddie have just touched upon. I just thought it was relevant because they are talking about it also in terms of teen research, etc.
Absolutely. Thanks, Siba. Very, very important to note. Yeah. Okay, question 3. What are the challenges parents and caregivers face in supporting young people? Rachel, it'd be great to hear that drug and alcohol perspective first on this one, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So again, it's those conflicting beliefs around drug use can be a challenge. And then balancing those two roles of being loving and supportive and then having clear expectations. So we often find that young parents might say to the young person that you need to do this and you need to go there. And then a young person might respond with, I don't want your support. This is a real challenge for parents when they want to give that advice and they want to do what's best for the young person, and then the young person is refusing that advice. And this can often be a reactive response that might come from fear. And, you know, as we've talked before, this is a natural parent protective instinct. And especially when you're talking about substances, it's really quite natural for parents' minds to go to all the harms that they know about substances. So then the question comes in, how do we manage that fear? And then again, that goes back to that reflective work of examining your own beliefs and your own assumptions and finding ways and strategies that you can manage that fear so that you can still be supportive and clear with your young person, but not to be reactive.
Awesome, thank you. Alana, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Look, when I was looking at this question, I wanted to first of all just highlight the challenges that general society is on parents. So because as we know, social media has been a big change in the last 10 or 15 years, and we're all in society, so we are impacted by the general stresses. So I just wanted to highlight that. Then the individual families and parent stresses, often you might have people balancing the work life, and, you know, there's, you know, the balance of that, and maybe both parents are working and they might not have family close to be supportive, and financial stresses. They might have their own alcohol issues or other sort of mental health issues themselves. So I think that's very hard, isn't it, when you've got their own stresses as being the parent or the caregiver, and that makes it more difficult. Then I wanted to sort of say that was from the parent point of view, but it's also, I think, Rachel, you highlighted it, if the teen has got problems with drugs or is acting and getting aggressive at home, which I've certainly seen families where that happens, that can be very stressful to environment. And also sometimes families can push each other's buttons and know what to say to upset and can be quite hurtful at times. So I think that's very challenging. And the last one I see that is very challenging, it's been increasing since COVID, is if a teen shows avoidant behaviour. So particularly with school refusal, that's become more common than it used to be. I've certainly seen that before COVID, but since COVID, I think a lot of parents, and I'm sure people listening tonight would have that experience where that's very challenging.
Absolutely. And Maddie, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yes, yeah. I think mine sort of goes back to what Rachel said in her first comment, the first question, about parents supporting young people and the challenge asking for help due to shame and embarrassment and guilt. I think that the stigma of one being a bad parent is definitely a challenge, and then also the stigma for your young person, you don't want them to be judged. So you want them to sort of stand tall and overcome the challenges. And so then, therefore, you may not want to talk about their problem with people. So even if it's a teacher or something. So I think that overcoming the stigmas is something that is very worth doing. And it is, I think it is definitely a mindset, and it's a mindset that you can change. So that's one thing, is stigma. Also, I think just the lack of knowledge of supports and strategies that are around, that's a big challenge in itself. Like if you find yourself in a stressful situation all of a sudden, you may not be aware of what there is out there for support. So I think that is tricky. You may not even be, you may be oblivious to the kinds of supports as well, so you don't even know to ask. And I think also when challenges arise, because of the stigma as well, but it can be very isolating for a parent. So then the parent can be isolated with a heightened sense of stress. So that's also a challenge in itself, and that can have the mirror neuron effect of, if you're stressed, then the young person's stressed. So there's a lot of challenges there. I hope I didn't overload everybody, because they're all overcomeable, if that's a word. But yeah, I think that with all those balls in the air, there's a lot of challenges.
It's certainly a tough job being a parent, that's for sure. Let alone adding teenagers on top. Ryan, I think we've heard lots about the parent perspective. What do you think from the young person's perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to do is kind of echo what all the fellow panelists have said for this question, and probably echo a bit of what we've already talked about throughout this forum already. I think from a young person perspective, one of the really big things we see is that those communication barriers between parent and young person is really something that has a big influence, and also acknowledging that these communication barriers go both ways. So it's not just on the parents to clear up those communication barriers. There is also work that young people at times do need to do, and that's where a lot of these services can really help to address that, and acknowledge that it's not just a one-way street. It does go both ways sometimes. Another thing that we see that can really create a challenge for parents supporting young people is when we have young people coming in and they're worried about those judgmental environments, we see that they are very quick to just shut down anything that they're worried about being judged about, or worried that might cause an argument. And they really go into their shell, and that's when we can see this behavior of going into their room, avoidance behavior, all of those types of things. So really encouraging that non-judgmental environment as much as possible. And one last thing that one of our clinicians was actually telling me about just the other day is this idea of, we focus a lot on what young people are doing wrong sometimes without necessarily telling them or giving them credit for what they're doing right. So an example of this might be, if they do go out into a park with some friends and do go drinking, we are very quick to point out the wrong behavior in that situation. And absolutely, we do need to acknowledge that. But if they go into that setting and they have their location settings on so that you know where they are, they've organised a designated driver so that they all have a safe way of getting home, and they are doing it in a controlled situation, we don't necessarily highlight the good elements of that situation at times. We're very quick at times to focus on the negatives there. So that's something that we do see where we're not always quick to acknowledge when young people do the right thing in those situations. So it's about finding that balance of definitely acknowledging when they have done the wrong thing, but also praising them when they have put themselves on the right side of those situations.
Absolutely, some very good things to consider there. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. And this is my favourite question of the night because it's something everyone can take away. So, panelists, what strategies can parents use to connect with their young person when they're experiencing difficulties? Alana, would you like to kick us off? I know you've got some really cool ideas around this.
Thank you. And look, I think Ryan's mentioned this quite a few times. What I tend to, one of the important strategies is communication, right? I think we've highlighted this a few times, is how to communicate with between the parent and the teen. And I think on that point, what I try to explain to parents and the teen is that both parent and teen need to be receptive. They need to be in the right relaxed and right environment to allow the effective communication. So from a parent point of view, often when we're very busy, we might find that we're, as Madeline says, juggling various balls, getting things ready, dinner ready, and we might miss an opportunity when the teen wants to be able to open up or say something. And sometimes just practically that doesn't work. So what's important is if we say we actually communicate to the teen that we are sort of busy, but we do find the time. But what we have to do as parents have to make that time and create another time. And so it's not always just saying, no, I'm too busy, because then the teen won't keep on coming up to us if they just sees that we're not busy. So we have to make sure that we're ready for communication, that we're relaxed, and that we're ready when the teen communicates to us, that we don't jump in and make quick solutions, and that we're non-judgmental and we listen. And in fact, most of it, we just need to listen, and we don't necessarily have to say too much. We can be led by the teen in that regard. And it's over time. It might not be just the first conversation we have, but over time. And then also, when I said we had to be receptive, we have to understand that the teen needs to be in a situation where they feel relaxed to be able to open up. And often I suggest to families to take, if it's been very stressful at home, do something outside the home, preferably on a one-to-one basis. And it's important that the teen feels safe. It's often a quiet place, no other siblings around listening, and they feel comfortable in that situation to open up and start talking. And it's also important to let the teen lead, or and not sort of question them too much if they're not in the mood to open up at that stage. So a good example is going for a walk, whether you have a dog or not, and providing that environment, or in a car is often good. I often suggest to people, when you're going for a drive, you can actually just go to a park and just sit in the car and just relax and have a bit of a chat. Some people prefer to go to a cafe, or some people prefer to do an activity, especially if you've got a teen's quite fidgety and needs to be doing something while they're sort of talking. So I think it's important to create those environments, or be aware of that environment. And the last thing I'd say with that, it's actually often you get a scenario where, and particularly in a male in this situation, comes home from school, and a parent's very keen to know what's happened, and they sort of straight away go up to the teen and say, how was your day? And they don't get much of a response, because that's not in an environment they feel comfortable to expose themselves. So just to remember that, try and do something that where you're not looking directly at them, and maybe something side by side, and that's a little bit less confronting to a teenager. So I think it's really important to understand ways to effectively communicate, and obviously there's a lot of support out there for people to learn and get better at that. The other thing I was going to say is also like I highlighted before, when you're doing, trying to encourage an activity. So you could do something with a teen. Teens really like it when we take an interest in some of their activities, what they're interested in. It might seem not important to us, but at their stage with their peers, it can be very important. And I gave an example to the panelists who enjoyed that when I said my daughter was a teen. I used to watch the Bachelor series with her. And a lot of, in fact, my husband and friends thought that was a bit odd. But then I explained that I actually, in that environment, my daughter opened up about all different relationships and different scenarios. And I used to just ask her just interesting questions. And I was very surprised at how thoughtful and considered that some of the teens are. So sometimes that's worth creating an environment like that. And the other one, a male equivalent, was when I actually joined my son, who was very much into video games at that stage. And he thought it was hilarious that I had no idea how to negotiate the car around the track. And he thought that was very funny, and he enjoyed that. And I think that was the next point I wanted to say, is humour. Try and sort of engage with a bit of humour. That often breaks the ice. And I think a lot of stress reduces down both sides, and it can allow more effective communication if we have a bit of humour, and also can laugh at ourselves, you know, and the teens respond well to that.
Some great suggestions there, Alana. Thank you. And Maddie, what would you say has worked for you?
Well, I think that on the same line as Alana, the listening thing, someone told me once a little strategy, and it was the 80-20 rule. So 80% listen, 20% talk. And even though it's not, you know, a definite measure, it's just something it's like a little trigger to make you remember. And then another little thing that goes with that is to be curious and not furious. So I think that was, for me, a nice little tool to have in my tool belt to actually stop and listen and just think, I actually don't need to talk right now. I'm a bit of a talker, so sometimes I might just jump in, but I realize it's actually quite relaxing to just let them go for it. So that was one thing that worked really well for me. And also constantly reminding myself that the adolescent is under construction. So mind and body under construction. So, and you may see, you know, someone who's looking like an adult, but they're still under construction. So that even if I watch a video that we show on our parent program every now and again, I keep thinking, you know, you can't watch it enough, I don't think. Another thing, I think a great strategy is know your support team. Who is in your side unconditionally? Who will help you? Who can you lean on without any judgment, without any fear, just knowing that they are in your team, your young person's team, your family's team. And that person may be a different person for different scenarios. But one of the best tools is actually coming to the point of acceptance, I think, of acceptance of a situation, because that can help with the emotion. And if you don't mind me just reading out the serenity prayer, because it's just so good. And I think that it just says so much. So it's, God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it's funny because I thought that's a bit odd to be talking about amongst parents, which I did at one stage. And I can't tell you the positive feedback and how many people actually knew that and use it as a mantra for themselves. And just knowing that we can't change people, we can't change situations, we can't change the weather, but we can change ourselves and our own perception. So I think that's a really good tool. And because once you have that, it's much easier to self-regulate. So it just sort of goes hand in hand, I find. So that's sort of my list. I do have a couple of videos that I would mention, and if that are really, really helpful for communication skills. And one of them is by Dan Siegel, Connecting to Calm. So maybe, Jess, I'll give you the link to that to add, if that's all right. And also, absolutely. Yeah, it's just so good. It's really good when just connecting to a person, whether it be a young person or an older person, but it's aimed at teenagers or parent to teen. And the other one is Brené Brown's Empathy, which is just such a wonderful thing. It helps you to switch from guessing and judging to actually being with someone in the space they're in. So that's my list of tools that I think are really helpful. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Maddie. And feel free to pop the links to those videos in the chat now, and I can absolutely also include
I'll
them
do
in
that
the
now.
follow-up email tonight.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Ryan, what sort of strategies have you got for us?
Oh, I think I'm probably going to take bits of what both Alana and Maddie have said here, but the first one I kind of want to share is going back to this idea of as parents, a natural tendency is to want to try and help and fix things as much as possible. It's definitely what we all want to do as humans even. So I think a really helpful way of going about this and at the start of these conversations is to just ask your young person, do you need advice or do you want me to listen? And going back to that 80-20 principle, it'll give you first and foremost a bit of clarity of what's your role in this situation. Are you holding the space for your young person to just be able to talk about what they're going through and you are there to just listen and absorb and give them that space? Or are they really seeking that advice from you in that instant? I think it's just a really, really simple but effective way to start those conversations. And it also then gives a young person that sense of you're actually caring about what they want out of this. You're not just assuming that they want advice or that they want you to listen. You're actively involved in this, and they will be really appreciated. They will really appreciate that as well. And the other thing, as Alana mentioned earlier, is just finding what interests your young person. So whether it is video games, if it's sport, if it's arts and crafts, and having a go at it, really getting involved in their activities and doing it with them. It's essential for that quality one-on-one time with them, and it can really help them feel less alone and seen as a person who is growing up and developing. And you'd be surprised how many times you start doing that with your young person, and the first couple of times they may just go, oh, you're not really good at this, but then they start coming to you and going, hey, do you want to do this painting with me? Or I'm going to jump on and play some video games. Do you want to come on and play for half an hour with me? And they really will start to open up. So yeah, I think definitely following on from what's already been said, but just some really simple and effective ways to work with your young person and build those relationships up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. Rachel, have you got any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, so a strategy that we suggest, again, is that reflective work. So considering before you can help others, having a look at how you're going and asking yourself, how am I going? How am I feeling? And do I need to get some more support? So connecting is not just being able to hear and sit with your young person and what they tell you. It's also about being in touch with how you feel. And reflecting, it might help you to identify any gaps that you might have. Maybe there are things that you don't know about drugs or your own reactions and beliefs. Another strategy that we suggest is if you are finding it difficult to have a conversation with the young person and hear what they're saying, just saying to them, I find this really hard to listen to. Can we take a break and come back to it later? So suspending a conversation that you find challenging, that's actually a strategy that you can use. And then some other tips around how to talk with your teens around drug use. And these echo a lot of the tips that have been said today. So it's around thinking about when should you talk to your teen. So we suggest having that conversation when there's privacy, so not around younger siblings that are there and in a location that they feel comfortable. When the mood is right, when it's not too stressful, when they don't have too much going on, and really picking the timing to start having the conversation. And again, we've suggested today car trips is a really great one where they're comfortable and you can have that kind of non-confrontal conversation. And also really important to remember that the first attempt may not be successful when you're talking about drugs with a young person, but to keep trying, to keep revisiting the conversation. And then how to have the conversation using open-ended questions are a really great way to allow the young person to feel comfortable to talk. Listening and acknowledging their feelings, again, that can be challenging if they're talking about things that are really hard to listen to, but it's around keeping yourself calm in those conversations and still acknowledging how they feel, avoiding that advice giving and shoulds, and also to be aware of stigma, so that there's going to be some reluctance maybe from the young person to talk about substances. There might be some fear around getting in trouble or what others might think. So just being aware that that's going to be in play when you're having that conversation. And then just to remember that the first conversation is just the start. It's something to keep revisiting. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. You brought that together nicely. Okay, our final question. What resources are available in the community for young people and their families? Now, I will just acknowledge we have a very small fraction of what is available in our community in the room today. So we are not going to overwhelm you with everything that there is. We're going to let Ryan, Maddie, and Rachel talk about their services a little bit. And in a follow-up email later tonight, I will have a lot more things that you can go through at your own time, just to let you absorb the information tonight. Yeah. So who would like to kick us off with talking about their service?
I can. Do you want me to?
Go for it, Maddie. Yeah.
I'll go for it. So EPIC was created by parents who had been through a challenging time with their young people. So we offer peer support, and we offer connection via walks, group walks, over the phone, in person. We have a parent program, and we attend all the youth interagency meetings in the Northern Sydney region. So we've become very closely, I was going to say related, in close contact. We collaborate regularly with the youth and family support organisations in our region. So when we had our concerns with our young people, it was the people that we wish we'd known then. So I think that when we talk about what resources there are in our community, there's some brilliant resources, and we have tapped into lots of them. We work with them, we speak with them, regularly. So I think that if you're ever confused, you can pick up the phone and call us. Everything that EPIC does, we have received funding for, so it's a free service. In fact, we buy you coffee when you come to our walks. So it's basically an open door. It's the space that is safe for parents of young people, and they can say it as it is. They can talk with other people. They can gain strategies, and really friends as well. So call us.
Thanks, Maddie. Who's next?
I can go next, or do you want to go next, Rachel?
No, you go.
All right. So Headspace is the National Youth Mental Health Foundation. There's over 150 locations nationwide, and I'm based at the Chatswood Centre. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we surface the entire upper and lower North Shore and extend out to Ryde as well. So whilst we have our base in Chatswood, we also have an outpost location in West Ryde and also up in Hornsby. So we are an early intervention and prevention service. We do work under that Medicare model to provide up to 10 free sessions for young people. So there's no cost at all for young people or for the families. And if Medicare is an issue, there are some other options as well that are of no cost to anyone involved. We also have GPs located in our service. So if there's a young person who may be struggling to find a community GP, they can come in and see one of our GPs, not just for mental health, but also for physical health, sexual health, anything along those lines. And I guess one thing I want to mention with resources available in the community is that there's been a really big push over the last couple of years for what's called a no wrong door approach. So what that essentially means, and it was kind of born out of us in the system knowing how hard it can be to navigate the system at times. So what it really means is that if you or your young person comes to any of the services in the region, and there is many amazing services in the region, if we're not the right service for you, or if we feel like there is a specialized service that will be able to do amazing work for your young person, we're not just going to give you their name and number and tell you to go and do it yourself. We will help facilitate a referral into those services, and ensure that you and the young person are looked after through every stage of that transition over. So we really try to avoid having young people retelling their story multiple times. We know that that can be traumatic for young people. And it also just ensures that you as a family aren't having to try and figure out what's the right place. And it just helps ensure that, young people are looked after at every stage. So if you're ever not sure, you can contact really any service in the community, and they will all be willing to help you find the right service for your young person, even if it's not that first service that you're in.
Thank you, Ryan, and some really important notes there around accessing services in general. Rachel, would you like to tell us all about SDEC?
I would. So SDEC stands for Sydney Drug Education and Counselling Centre. So we support young people through one-to-one drug and alcohol counselling. So this is for young people aged 12 to 25. And then we also support parents and carers who are concerned about their young person's substance use. So we work with parents so that they can then support their young person. We know that outcomes for young people with drug and alcohol use is better when the families are on board with treatment options. So our SDEC stats actually show that when the young person's family comes initially, 70% of young people then will also start counselling at SDEC. So the support we offer for families is through our 6-week group called Paving Ways. So it's a really safe and supportive environment for parents and carers to explore strategies to manage their own stress as well as the behaviours of the young person. And it gives opportunity for parents to learn new skills and knowledge, as well as having support from a group where other families are having similar challenges. This can then reduce the feelings of isolation and shame that are often attached to substance use. So to book in, just call through our office line and they'll take you through the next steps. We run lots of groups throughout the year and they're often online. We service the whole Sydney North area, so we have counselling centres in St Leonard's and Manly, and we're also co-locating with Avalon, Hornsby and Ryde. So we have a Chinese-speaking counsellor at Ryde and St Leonard's, and then a Portuguese-speaking counsellor at St Leonard's and Hornsby. And we also quite regularly run a webinar called Parents Prepared. So this is a 1-hour webinar for parents to get a brief intro into our service. It goes through information on drugs, their effects, and then tips for talking with young people about drug use. And we're really excited to have a Chinese translated version of this coming out in term 3 of the school term. So that's something that we're working on. And then also we do know that where drug and alcohol concerns, there can also be an increase in family violence, which is perpetrated by the young person. So, for example, this could be standing over a parent, threatening, making someone feel unsafe, damaging property, intimidating behaviours. So we know there's not a lot of services for this area, and parents we meet find that really difficult to navigate. This can be because they're fearful around feeling guilty around reporting it, or fearful for themselves and other family members. So if this is something that families are experiencing, we can support them through those challenges. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our pre-formatted questions. Now we are going to open up to all of you. Siba, I must thank you. I saw that you have been managing the Q&A for me while we've been going there. But before we do jump into the Q&A, I do just want to make a few notes. So we have purposefully made the focus of today's forum broad, and that's to help include the diverse range of difficulties that all of the families here might be facing. And we might not be able to get to all of your questions or answer them with as much depth as we might like to be able to. I would also like to remind everyone to keep in mind that it is a public forum, so we can't discuss individual circumstances due to maintaining confidentiality, not only for yourself, but for your young person as well. So please utilise the resources from today's session to help continue the conversation where needed and seek support if required. And please keep an eye out for my email a little bit later tonight with all those links if you haven't already found your way to some of these amazing services. So with that, I would really love to answer your questions. If you'd like to pop them in the Q&A function or the chat box, either is fine. We might avoid letting people talk just so we can kind of manage any questions coming through. So if you do have something you'd like to ask, please send them through now. I might just revisit some of the ones that we've had while we've been chatting. So Siba, I'll read out your responses so you don't have to use your voice. So Kavita actually asked, could you please share approaches or tips on managing teens' extreme highs and lows? So Siba has said, try not to take things personally. There is a high chance their reaction and response is not about you, although you are the one receiving in the end, which parents are often at the end of that. Panelists, does anyone have any other approaches or tips on managing teens' extreme highs and lows? I know that's a tough one. Maddie, you look like you've...
Oh, well, actually, I think Alana answered it a little bit earlier when I can't remember her exact words, but it's the teen going through those roller coaster years, and I have the analogy of you can't be on that roller coaster with them. So there's a few different analogies, like standing on the side and waiting till they come off, or they might be in the Rocky River and you are the safe person on the side that has the rope. So I suppose, I don't know if that's the direction that she was wanting the answer to go, but my thought of it is to try and remove yourself from the ups and downs that are happening and remain grounded yourself.
If I can add in there too, Maddie, I agree. And that's what I was trying to highlight, because they will go on the ups and downs, and we've seen that before. And I think all of us highlighted if we jump in too quickly, so if they, are sort of, something goes wrong with their school, they've had some interactions with, say, friends, and they're not happy. Sometimes as a parent, we can also get alarmed at that and jump in too quickly, so we have to, it comes down to communication, really, how you handle it, and make sure that you let them speak and see how they're going and check in, but we don't react straight away, because we might find in an hour or so that they're talking to their friend and you ask them and there's no problem at all. And in the meantime, we've gone through that emotional roller coaster where they've moved on from that, So I think it's a combination of all the things that we suggested, is not quickly reacting, taking a bit of a step ourselves, take a breath and see how it pans out, and keeping communication. And then over time, later on, they'll come and reveal what's going on if it's more serious, and allow us to communicate with that. And I think that's what Maddie sort of agrees, that you don't, as a parent, go along the roller coaster ride, is it because it's exhausting if you do that, and you'll get very worn out if you go up and down with them. So try and take a step back. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that definitely would... Oh yeah, go Maddie.
No, I just wanted to mention that connecting to calm video that we'll share with you by Dan Siegel, he's got a really good technique for that kind of communication as well.
Yeah, awesome. I was just going to say, I think definitely learning to, take a bit of a step back and reset yourself is only going to be a good role model for your young person in those times as well. And, it might not work the first 100 times, but it does eventually sink in, that's for sure. Okay. Another question that Siba so kindly answered for us is, how do we reset this when we've judged them in the past and they've shut down? How do we re-engage? So I'll start with Siba's response. So she said, manage your expectations and theirs. It will take time to reset. Expect some pushback initially, but if you're coming from a place of kindness and truly intend not to judge, we all fail at times, so please be kind to yourself as well. Your efforts will be rewarded. We've got quite a few epic parents who can attest to that. Thank you, Siva. And do any of our panelists have any thoughts on how they can reset when their teens already feel judged by them?
I'm happy to answer something on that. I'm going to throw another P. I said protect and prepare. My third one is patience. Okay, patience on the parent and patience with the team. Also, the other thing I was going to say is that, and for the longer run, I would say that patience. So it's not going to happen on day one or day two. Just keep on working it, and you build up trust over time. But the other thing is, and I'm sure Ryan would agree with this, that a lot of the teens we see, that when you've got the parent there, that they, sometimes can be angry or surly or quiet. But when I have the one-on-one on the teen, they come out of the, bit by bit, they come out of their shell, and they're actually very thoughtful, very considerate young people. And once we take the heat out of the situation, they don't want to be in a bad relationship with their parent. They want things to be better, but they don't know how to do it. So I think if the parent does make that effort, and over time, I think the team will respond well to that. So because they actually want to be in a better place. They don't enjoy not having a great relationship. And it's important to remember that as a parent, even though at the time, in the heat of the battle, we can't see that. And that's why we've talked about before, and Maddie's mentioned, to use your peers, have a break. If you're feeling that you're getting very intense as a parent, you need to step back and sort of reflect and say, was I probably overreacted, or I didn't, and talk to someone else. And I think we didn't mention it in the questions. It's really, I suggest to people that to have a friend that's got older children than yourself, that you like how they've responded with their kids, and to sort of run that past someone who's been there before. I think that's very valuable, as well as obviously seeing the professionals.
Absolutely. Ryan, did you have something to add? It looks like you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to echo exactly what Alana said. We see it so many times where the young person, they will come in with the parents, and they might really keep to themselves, or there might be that anger, that frustration, and then as soon as they are removed from that environment, they do tend to come out of their shell. And we get it a lot of times where young people say, I do really love my parents, or I do really appreciate what they do. I'm just going through a lot of changes, and sometimes I feel like they don't understand, or they don't get what I'm going through. And what I would say is, that's just, a lot of that is to do with young people as they're growing up. They are going through big hormonal changes and big shifts in their life. I think one thing that we do lose focus of is that when we look at the transition from primary school to high school, it's a massive shift in their life. When they get towards the end of high school and they're having to think about university or TAFE, looking to get into the workforce, we're putting a lot of pressure on our young people at a stage where they're still figuring out a lot of things. So a lot of this frustration that can be built up is not necessarily reflective of how they feel towards you, but sometimes it builds up to a point where they find that is their outlet, unfortunately. And so I think, as we've talked about a few times tonight, it's really having that patience, one of those P's that Alana said. It can be tough at times, but having that patience, giving the young person that space, and I think really drilling it back down to what I said before with, do you need advice, or do you need me to listen? And giving the young person the option to respond of, this is what I need from you, and letting them have that space if they do want you to listen, or then if they do want the advice, that's when you can really go into that parental mode and give them that parental advice that they're really craving at the time.
Absolutely. And it's never too late to reset. Sometimes it just takes trying a few times. Okay, the next question we have. So Siva has kindly answered this one as well, so I'm just going to read out her response after, and then we'll go to the panel. So, any tips on how to influence partners and spouses who do not agree with more empathetic communication? Definitely a very tricky one. So Siba has suggested look at the end result and outcome that you both want, which is keeping your young person safe, sane, and content. And she's purposefully omitted the word happy, which is overused and misused. And I 100% agree there. If you agree that the end result is shared, then you would agree different approaches are required to be taken when what's tried isn't working. Now, does anyone from our panel have anything they'd like to add there on tips to get parents on the same page? Maddie, go for it.
Just one thing that I think a lot of parents will say that they're not on the same page. And I've sat with a few parents, we've met for coffee in person, and both partners. And in actual fact, there's so many similarities on their page. Like there's always love on both pages. And so in actual fact, it is the one page. There's sometimes some things that are just hard to get around. And I would say that there's some brilliant organisations out there, and one in particular that comes in to mind is Uniting in Chatswood, who have a family carer, mental health family carer unit, and they have supported so many families to overcome these sorts of situations. So that's what I would say. I would say that we're probably more alike than disalike in many ways. However, support is there, and I don't think there's a waiting list or anything, so people can reach out to me and I can give them that information, or if we can share it somewhere else. Yeah,
wonderful. Thank you, Maddie. Does anyone else have any thoughts before we move on? We've got lots of questions coming through.
I have on
go,
that.
Alana.
I've seen quite a few disparities between parents over the time. I think if there's really differences, it's really helpful to seek psychologists or go to Headspace or a mediator that can help bring you together. Because as Maddie said, there's often things that you have in common, but I think everybody's got used to a certain way of behaving and reacting, and understand it's their stress that's causing that. It's not how they feel. So I think moving them, both the parents, out of that situation helps as well to do that, and have, well, like what we said, between the parent and the teen, for the parents themselves to go to coffee, not to discuss it in the heat of a moment when something's argued. So when they're all sort of upset, to again take them to a place outside the home to have a sort of a chat and have some privacy for the parents to have a little bit of coming together and realise they really are on the same team and sort of to work together. I think that's helpful. I think the other thing is education's helpful, because again, I've seen, I haven't talked about it tonight, but I've actually seen quite a lot of eating disorder patients, and I've had where one parent has really struggled with that, and it's quite a difference. And I think education is helpful. So I think we mentioned before, we're going to attach a couple of good resources that people can do. So I think if you get the partner to read, and there's lots of information now out there to understand what's going on with the teen, I think that might help soften it as well, and those differences.
Excellent. Thank you, Alana. Okay, we've got lots of questions waiting, so I might push forward. So the next question we've got is how can a parent, I'm just going to kind of rephrase it so it's a bit like easier for everyone to address. So how can I support my teen to see that her core friends are engaging in some risk-taking behaviours and give her strategies to make new friends? She's keen to explore new friendships but doesn't quite know how to go about it. So I guess the question is, how can a parent support their teen to find new avenues for friends? Does anyone have any ideas around that?
Again, I'm happy to jump in there. So, and I suppose, yeah, what I was going to say, because at school, it is really challenging them in high school to change groups. And I'm sure Ryan could add on to that in terms of, the playground politics and that. So I think a good start is finding outside school, actually, an interest group, like what we mentioned before. If there's something that they enjoy, whether it's playing sport, whether they learn to sew or do craft or do multiple different things, that's a great way to meet new friends. And I think it's really healthy as well to have some friends outside school, because if there's very skirmishes that go on in the school ground, then they've got some other support outside there. And also with that, you can, as a parent, if you've got friends outside school that you've got kids in common, again, to do activities outside. So that's what I think would be a good start, rather than losing what they have already, to actually, forge interest in whatever they like to do and support that and provide some different friends. At a certain point in teen years, especially the older sort of teens, I think working part-time is a great way for them to meet new friends. And I think I encourage a lot of my families to allow sort of part-time work, because it allows the teen to develop some responsibility, and they learn. And I think they have good influences from working part-time, especially if they're not engaging well at school, if they're not particularly academic. Often their self-esteem is low throughout that time. I think it's really, I see a lot of kids that really benefit from part-time work, and that's a way, again, for meeting different friends.
Absolutely.
I was just going to super quickly jump in as well. I think a really good thing is to let your young person, let your child know that it is also okay to change friends or to change friendship groups. We see it a lot where young people become so worried about, as Alana said, the playground politics that happens, and they're so worried that about the repercussions of what's going to happen with leaving that friendship group. But what we see most, if not all the time, is that anything that does come about from a young person changing these friendship groups is very superficial and will not last long. So I think it's about giving them the confidence that if they feel like they need to make that change, that they can make that change. They don't have to stick around in that friendship group if they don't feel like it's the right thing for them. But also that gives them that bit of autonomy, that bit of self-belief that they're doing it. They're not being told by someone that they need to change group. They feel like they have that decision, or they're able to make that decision that they want to leave that friendship group as well. So it's about giving them that little bit of responsibility, but also that bit of autonomy as well, so that they feel like they're doing it, they're not being told to.
Absolutely. And I think Alana and Ryan, what you've both said answers a few of the questions we're getting, which is around, spending lots of time online, or, kids that are really worried about going to school or unengaged in school. I think a lot of these things can be applied to that, having them engage in outside activities or different activities at school that will help them find new avenue for friends or new ways to connect with their peers can go a really long way. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got a really good question here from a parent who has said it's very reassuring to learn of all the services available, but they're wondering when is the best time to seek help from these services. They're wondering, for example, after the first or second instance of a teen exploring with alcohol, it's hard to know when they're overreacting. So they would like some advice around when accessing a service might be appropriate.
I'll just say one or two words: early intervention. Early reach out. It's never going to be the wrong time too early, I don't think.
Rachel?
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, being in an early intervention service, the earlier the better. But I think again, it's also about giving them that little bit of autonomy. So it's not, we don't want to be forcing them into something and having them, push back on receiving that help. It's about giving them that little bit of autonomy, saying, there's these services available, it might be a really good idea if we help you link in with it, or, if you're struggling with anything, we can explore that. They may not necessarily want to look down that path at the first instance, but if they know about what's available to them, we get 2-3 months down the track and they hit that point where they go, okay, I do actually need that help, and they will be willing to link in. So let them know at the earliest stage possible, but also be prepared if they don't necessarily want to jump on it straight away. It's about giving them that knowledge of what is available.
Can I just go on to that? So I think that's awesome. And I think it's awesome for parents just to gather all the information. That was probably where I was coming from, is find out what's out there. And so that then you have links to the supports when you need them and when they're ready.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Oh, Rachel, sorry, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just with around the drinking example, that's such a classic one that we get, because it is really hard to know when is the problem starting, when are we overreacting. And this is something I say out in the community, in schools all the time. Just call if you're concerned, just check. And then, you know, even if they engage with our service for a little bit, they can get a bit of harm reduction and a little bit of information. So yeah, so just reach out, and that early intervention is so important, especially when we're talking about drug use.
Absolutely. Okay, this next question is probably one I can answer. So someone is asking if we could suggest safe places for young people and teens to hang out and socialise. When they were young, there were lots of youth centres, but not sure about what's in Ryde. So unfortunately, I can only speak for City of Ryde. I know we've got a lot of parents from a lot of areas here, but unfortunately in Ryde we don't have a youth centre. But what we do is we focus on providing lots of opportunities to get out in the community with free activities during the school holidays. I will be putting up a survey in the next slide. At the bottom of that survey, you can sign up to our community newsletter to keep up to date with anything we've got going on in Ryde. And we do try to put on lots for that reason. If you are from another council area, however, if you visit your council's website and you type in youth or young people, you will be surprised with how much there is going on. So please don't forget about your council websites. My role is in everywhere in Northern Sydney, so there's always lots going on. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to add to that at all. All good. If not, we can move on to the next one. Okay, we've got a great question here around what can I do when my teen doesn't want to worry me and is going into their shell to protect me from worrying? Does anyone have anything they'd like to say on that?
I will if no one else. I was just going to, the first thing I think about that is, it comes back to what we've said, is communication, to provide an environment. I would suggest going out of the house and trying to sort of have a bit of a chat, maybe do an activity, have a bit of fun and see what's going on and listen to the teen. But I also be considering, do I react and get worried when they mention something? And that's really hard for a parent. I think when we sort of talk to them, let them communicate, we have to be careful we don't not only jump in, but we don't actually respond by looking worried on our face. And kids are very actually good at reading us. So we also have to look at ourselves and say, do we talk, about our stresses a lot, or how do we manage that, I suppose? And that's where I think, Maddie, you could answer this in that sense, having Epic and other peers and other parents that you can talk to help you deal with your stresses and your worries, so that we're not bringing that, and then the kids are not feeling that stress.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alana. Maddie, did you have something you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think that was covered really nicely. I think that, yeah, well done. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, I will just acknowledge I can see a lot of questions about online behaviour and being addicted to screens. And I just want to say that is an incredibly huge topic to address, and it is something I'm looking at addressing. But I do have a bunch of services and resources, I guess, for the meantime. I will just put these ones in the chat just because it's very very relevant. Oh, it's not linking. Okay, give me a minute and I'll come back to that. But I will put those resources for screen time in the chat for everyone, and I will include them in the follow-up email as well.
Can I just say something about the online? And I know that is a topic, but I suppose I just wanted to reinforce, and what Ryan has also said, that what we've suggested, if we give the kids something that they're interested in, and help provide that, or even work, I think what I hear from teenagers, and also I've got a lot of patients I've seen through this, and I've actually seen them come out the other side in their 20s now, and they often will say that what made a difference is if they had something else to do. Because if we just say, no, you should, we keep on saying, no, you have to get off, but don't provide or help other opportunities or other interesting things for the kids to do. So when we say they should do less time online or do this, if we help provide other opportunities or other things for them to do, then that will help. So it just reduces that time that they're on. So that's why I'm a big believer in providing other interests or work, part-time work, rather than spending their time online.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that on, Alana.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look. Okay, with a focus on early intervention, are there education/awareness sessions for teens and youth by youth service providers to learn about available supports, risk factors, life skills, managing frustrations, etc., maybe during school holidays? So yes, we absolutely do have a variety of things on, not just in Ryde, but throughout the Northern Sydney district. I know, Rachel, maybe you can talk to it a little bit more, but I know you've got some parenting webinars coming up, is that right, with SchoolLink?
Yes, we do.
Yes. So this is just one example, but maybe Rachel can talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's for parents around substance use. Again, it's from the Matilda Centre and from ESTEC as well. So it's that the first recognizing and how to start those conversations, and then what to do when your young person is using substances. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome, thank you. So we throughout the year there are a variety of these things on. It's also something we try to embed in our school holiday programs, making sure there's different life skills and ways to get kids skilled in those areas. So keep an eye out, and yeah, strongly recommend having a look at what your local council's got on their website. Okay, I'm just having a look. Done that one. I think we've probably answered everything we can tonight. I am just going to put up our final slide, and our lovely panelists are going to share one final nugget of wisdom with us. So while you listen to these nuggets of wisdom, if you could take a moment to complete our survey, it just gives us some great feedback. It helps us shape future programs and address current needs that parents are experiencing. So it does really help, and it really goes a long way. And we do have our community newsletter at the end of that survey as well, if you'd like to sign up. So I'll hand over to our panelists, and I'll keep sending through those online, the online addiction links for you all. So would maybe, Alana, would you like to kick yourself with your nugget of wisdom? Okay,
so I think I'm just going to reinforce, I've come up with the 3 Ps tonight, haven't I? Protect, prepare, and patience is the first nugget. And I think the other one was when I mentioned before the anchors. That's what parents can do. If you're kind of aware of all the anchors for the kids, and I've particularly highlighted finding an interest or activity that they like to do. And also as they're older, is part-time work is an interest as well. So I think they're the 2 sort of main nuggets I want to leave with.
Amazing. Thank you, Alana. Maddie, you're next on my screen.
Okay. Well, I'll do 2 as well then, and I'll revert back to the be curious, not furious. I love that one. And also know that you're not on this journey alone.
Absolutely. Rachel?
So my nugget of wisdom is that parenting young people is an opportunity to grow and learn different ways of being a parent, and learning about yourself in the process. So you'll be faced with things that you didn't think were going to happen, and it's an opportunity to grow and dig deep and find out what's possible. So that's a very strengths perspective of my nugget of wisdom.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I want to go back to what I said before, the strategies of just remember to ask, do you need advice or do you want me to listen? It's such a simple and effective way to find out what the young person wants, and it will help you kind of guide how you're going to go about helping them as well. And I guess just to remember, young people do really appreciate the work that parents and families do, even if they don't always show it. So just remember that for the times where you might get frustrated, they do appreciate you and they do love you.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you to all of our wonderful panelists tonight. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and your insights. And thank you to all of our wonderful attendees. I will send that follow-up email around tonight. And yeah, that's all from us. I can see 2 people have their hands up, so we might wait for some people to drop off and I can let you talk if you'd like. Off they go. They're nearly all logged off.